What do you do when the shooter is a child? When the face of evil still has baby fat? These are the youngest school shooters in history, and the shocking truth is, most people have never even heard of them. January 29, 1979. A day that would forever change the perception of school violence. It would be the day that shattered the belief that school shootings were a tragedy only perpetrated by adults. Brenda and Spencer, just 16 years old, became the face of a new, terrifying reality. A reality that no one could have prepared for. Brenda Ann Spencer was born on April 3, 1962, the youngest of 3 children. Her early life was anything but stable. Raised in a fractured home in the San Carlos neighborhood of San Diego, Brenda lived in squalor after her parents separated. She lived with her father, Wallace Spencer, in a small, overcrowded house, one that lacked basic comforts and one where love and care were almost entirely absent. Her home was dark, cluttered, and cramped. She and her father reportedly slept on a single, stained mattress on the floor, sometimes without electricity or heat. There was no warmth in the household, no nurturing, no structure, just a grim survival. For a young girl, this was a desolate existence. Brenda, a quiet and withdrawn child, began to retreat further into herself. Her peers were navigating the usual teenage milestones, dances, friendships, and dreams of the future, while Brenda seemed lost in the shadows of her own mind, slipping further into isolation. Her teachers took note of her silence. She didn't engage much in class, rarely completed assignments, and seemed indifferent to everything around her. While others her age were making friends and engaging with the world, Brenda seemed numb, detached, and closed off from the world around her. But there were signs. Warning signs that would go ignored. Brenda had a reputation for unpredictable behavior. She was known for dressing in all black, speaking openly about death and violence, and making troubling comments about harming herself. One classmate recalled Brenda saying, "One day I'm going to do something really big. Something everyone will remember." Yet despite these ominous words, no one acted. No one stepped in. No one took her threats seriously. As the years went on, Brenda's behavior grew darker. She began to kill birds with a BB gun, and she shot out windows at the school. She was arrested for petty theft. A school psychologist, recognizing the danger signs, evaluated her and determined that Brenda was suicidal. But despite this, she wasn't institutionalized and no significant treatment was provided. She was simply sent back home. To the same bleak house, the same father, the same dysfunction. Then, just 1 month before the attack, something chilling happened. Wallace Spencer, Brenda's father, gave her a semi-automatic .22 caliber Ruger rifle for Christmas, along with 500 rounds of ammunition. When asked why he would give his troubled, depressed daughter a firearm, Wallace Spencer reportedly said, "She wanted it." And so, Brenda, already spiraling, had a weapon. A weapon that would forever change the course of her life and the lives of others. The morning of January 29, 1979, began like any other. Brenda, still in the darkness of her own mind, drank some whiskey and took tranquilizers. She then walked to her bedroom window, opened the blinds, and gazed across the street at Cleveland Elementary School, where children were arriving for class. Laughing, talking, unaware that their world was about to be shattered. And then, without warning, the sound of gunfire shattered the morning air. Brenda took aim from her window. The first person she shot was the school's principal, Burton Ragg. He had rushed outside trying to protect the children, but he never made it back. He was killed instantly. Moments later, Mike Sucher, the school's custodian, ran outside to help. He too was gunned down. But Brenda wasn't done. She continued to fire, methodically, without emotion. 8 children were wounded, most of them hit in the back as they fled in terror. One police officer was also injured in the chaos. As Brenda sat calmly in her bedroom, reloading and firing, the scene outside was one of pure panic. Children screamed in terror. Blood stained the pavement. Little bodies scrambled for cover behind bushes, trees, and lampposts, hiding from the barrage of bullets. And still the gunfire kept coming. For over 6 hours, a tense standoff ensued. Brenda, barricaded in her home, refused to surrender. But then, in a moment of chilling calmness, she made a phone call. She called a local reporter and, when asked why she was doing this, she gave a response that would haunt the nation. "I don't like Mondays," she said. "This livens up the day." Finally, after hours of negotiation, Brenda surrendered. She walked out of the house, unarmed, almost disinterested, as though she had simply gone through the motions. No panic. No remorse. Just a quiet resignation to the situation. She was arrested immediately. As the world processed what had happened, journalists scrambled to understand this teenage sniper. A 16-year-old girl living in squalor, ignored by those around her, had become a killer. But what was it that led Brenda Spencer to commit such a heinous act? What went wrong? Brenda was charged as an adult with 2 counts of murder and multiple counts of attempted murder. During her trial, it was revealed that she had long been struggling with mental health issues, and her obsession with violence was evident in her journals. But it wasn't just her troubled mind that played a role, it was the failures of those around her. Her family, the school, and even the community failed to intervene when they saw the warning signs. Her defense team argued that she was insane at the time of the shooting, and in 1980 Brenda was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Over the years she has expressed some level of regret, but also confusion. She has claimed that her father's gift of the gun, something she never truly wanted, was a cruel joke, and that it was the final push that led her down this dark path. Despite her claims, the parole board has repeatedly denied her release, with the most recent denial coming in 2022. Brenda remains in prison to this day, her actions continuing to haunt the San Diego community. Cleveland Elementary School, the site of the shooting, was never reopened. The building was eventually demolished. But the memories of that day linger, etched into the minds of every survivor, every parent, every teacher who raced to the school in terror. They still remember the sound of those gunshots. They still see the bodies. They still wonder, how did we miss the signs? Brenda Spencer was not a monster in the traditional sense. She wasn't a masked villain or a career criminal. She was a teenage girl. A child who, for a few agonizing moments, became the face of evil. And in doing so, she changed the way America would view school shootings forever. On February 19, 1997, in the small, remote town of Bethel, Alaska, something happened that would forever stain the snow red and change the town's peaceful life for good. On that cold, tragic day, 16-year-old Evan Ramsey would become a name known across the nation, but for all the wrong reasons. Born on February 8, 1981, Evan Ramsey's life began under a cloud of dysfunction and hardship. From the very start, life dealt him a cruel hand. His father, Don Ramsey, was a violent man with a criminal past. He would later be imprisoned after a series of armed standoffs with law enforcement. His mother, Lori, struggled with addiction, and their home became a chaotic, unstable environment. Reports of neglect, starvation, and physical abuse painted a grim picture of Evan's early years. By the time Evan was just 7 years old, the state had intervened. He and his brothers were taken from their mother's custody, but rather than finding safety, Evan was tossed from one foster home to another. Some of these homes were strict and cold, others downright abusive. The system, which was meant to protect him, failed him time and again. By the time he landed in Bethel at 16 years old, Evan was a deeply broken boy, traumatized, angry, and desperately alone. At Bethel Regional High School, he was an outsider. He didn't fit in. His classmates found him odd, awkward. He was bullied relentlessly for being different, for the way he dressed, the way he talked, and for his inability to connect with others. He had few friends, and the ones he had were often troubled themselves. In the isolation of his own mind, Evan found an escape: video games. But not just any games. He was obsessed with first-person shooters, games that allowed him to imagine a world where he could be powerful, where he could get revenge, where he could win. But there's a difference between fantasy and reality. And for Evan, that line began to blur. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, Evan began to talk to his classmates about doing something big. He spoke about becoming famous, about making people pay. He told peers that he planned to bring a gun to school. Many of them thought he was joking, dismissed him as just another troubled teen. But on February 19, 1997, there would be no jokes. That morning, Evan arrived at Bethel Regional High School, with a 12-gauge shotgun concealed in his clothing. He had taken it from his foster family's home, an legally owned firearm that had been poorly secured. When he walked into the lobby of the school, Evan paused for a moment. He stood there and then, without warning, he opened fire. The first person to fall was 15-year-old Josh Palacios, a student, a classmate, a child. Evan shot him in the abdomen. Josh collapsed and later died from his wounds. Next, Evan turned the gun on the school's principal, Ron Edwards. As the principal tried to de-escalate the situation, Evan shot him in the back. Ron Edwards died in the hallway attempting to protect his students. Screams echoed through the school. Chaos erupted instantly, students diving under tables, teachers barricading doors. The fear was palpable. The panic was suffocating. In total, Evan fired 15 shots, and after briefly leaving the hallway, he entered the school library. But that's when something shifted. Something inside him clicked. For the first time since the shooting began, Evan realized the magnitude of his actions. He put the shotgun under his chin, finger on the trigger, but in that moment he didn't pull it. Instead, he walked out of the school and surrendered to the authorities. In the hours that followed, the full scope of what had transpired became clear. The media descended as the nation watched in disbelief. Another school shooting. But this time, it happened in a place so remote, so small, that most Americans couldn't even find it on a map. Evan Ramsey was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of attempted murder. His trial would reveal a heartbreaking portrait of a boy raised in chaos. His defense attorneys argued that Evan didn't fully understand the permanence of death. They said he didn't truly believe anyone would die. That he was manipulated by older teens, who reportedly encouraged him to follow through with the attack. But the prosecution painted a different picture. They pointed to the planning. The shotgun. The chilling statements Evan made in advance. They said he knew exactly what he was doing, and the jury agreed. In 1998, at the age of 17, Evan Ramsey was convicted and sentenced to 210 years in prison. He became one of the youngest people in Alaska to ever receive such a sentence. Evan will be eligible for parole in the year 2066, when he will be 85 years old. From prison, Evan has spoken publicly, reflecting on the choices he made that fateful day. In one interview he said, "I was just angry. I was tired of being bullied. I didn't really think it would end like that." He described feeling trapped, emotionally numb, manipulated by those around him. But regardless of the reasons, the damage was done. 2 lives were lost. Countless more were shattered. A small town was left mourning the victims, and forever scarred by the violence that erupted in its heart. It's easy to paint school shooters as monsters, soulless, evil. And make no mistake, what Evan Ramsey did was horrific. It was unforgivable. A devastating act of violence that changed the course of lives forever. But his story forces us to confront something much more uncomfortable. What happens when the system fails a child from the very beginning? When red flags are ignored, trauma goes untreated, and pain festers in silence. Evan didn't come from nowhere. He was born into chaos, raised in trauma, and pushed to the edge. And on one cold February morning in Bethel, he fell. Some say Evan Ramsey was a victim. Others say he's a murderer. The truth? He's both. Today, Evan sits in a prison cell, a boy who once wanted to be seen, to be heard, to matter. But now he is remembered not for who he could have been, but for what he did. December 1, 1997. West Paducah, Kentucky. It was a Monday morning like any other at Heath High School. Students gathered in the lobby for a before-school prayer meeting, a routine that brought comfort and community. Among them was 14-year-old Michael Carneal, a freshman known for his quiet demeanor and struggles with bullying. But that morning Michael carried more than just books. Hidden in his duffel bag were multiple firearms, including a stolen pistol. As the prayer circle concluded, he pulled out the pistol and opened fire, discharging 11 shots into the group. 3 girls, Nicole Hadley, Jessica James, and Kay Stager, were killed and 5 other students were wounded. The attack lasted mere seconds but left an indelible scar on the community. Michael dropped the weapon and surrendered to the school principal, Bill Bond, who escorted him to the office to await authorities. The motive was unclear, but the impact was immediate and devastating. Michael's background revealed a troubled youth. He had been bullied and struggled with mental health issues. In the aftermath, he claimed to hear voices, a symptom that would later be central to his defense. Despite these claims, he was indicted as an adult on 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. His legal team pursued an insanity defense, citing his mental state and auditory hallucinations. However, he ultimately pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In 2022, after serving 25 years, Michael Carneal faced the Kentucky Parole Board. During the hearing, he expressed remorse for his actions and acknowledged his ongoing mental health struggles, stating that he still hears voices despite being on psychiatric medication. The board, considering the severity of his crimes and the impact on the victims and community, denied his parole, ordering him to serve the remainder of his life sentence without the possibility of release. The tragedy at Heath High School remains a poignant reminder of the devastating effects of school violence and the importance of addressing mental health issues among youth. The community continues to heal, honoring the memories of those lost and supporting the survivors. March 24, 1998. Jonesboro, Arkansas. A tranquil afternoon at Westside Middle School shattered when 2 students, 13-year-old Mitchell Johnson and 11-year-old Andrew Golden, executed a meticulously planned ambush. Golden pulled a fire alarm, prompting students and teachers to evacuate. As they gathered outside, Johnson and Golden opened fire from a wooded area, killing 5 and injuring 10. The victims included 4 students and a teacher who shielded a student from gunfire. The attackers attempted to flee but were apprehended by police. Both boys had troubled histories. Johnson had expressed violent intentions prior to the attack, while Golden had previously threatened violence. Tried as juveniles, they were sentenced to confinement until age 21, the maximum under Arkansas law at the time. Johnson was released in 2005, Golden in 2007. Post-release, Johnson faced multiple legal issues including drug and firearm charges, resulting in additional prison time. Golden changed his name to Drew Grant and lived quietly until his death in a 2019 car crash. The tragedy led to calls for stricter juvenile sentencing laws and remains a somber chapter in the history of school violence. The West Side Middle School shooting serves as a grim reminder of the potential for violence in unexpected places and the importance of vigilance in addressing warning signs. May 21, 1998. A morning like any other for the students of Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, but what they couldn't know was that this day would be the last time they would walk the halls with the same sense of security. In a quiet, suburban school, a tragedy was unfolding that would leave scars not just on the community, but on an entire generation. At just 15 years old, Kip Kinkle, a student at Thurston High, would unleash unimaginable terror on his classmates. Armed with a semi-automatic rifle, 2 handguns, and a bag full of ammunition, he stepped into the school cafeteria. It was just after 8 a.m., and students were gathered in their usual spots, laughing, talking, eating breakfast before the bell rang to start the day. But Kip, his mind clouded by delusions and paranoid thoughts, had different plans. In the span of just 15 minutes, he killed 2 students and injured 25 others, firing indiscriminately at anyone in his line of sight. The cafeteria, once a place of normalcy, transformed into a chaotic scene of terror and confusion. Screams echoed through the hallways and students, teachers, and staff scrambled for safety. Some hid under tables while others made a dash for the nearest exits. But the violence didn't start that day. It started the night before. The night Kip Kinkle killed his own parents, William and Faith Kinkle, both respected educators. After being suspended from school for bringing a stolen handgun to campus, Kip went home, a place where he should have been safe, but instead he chose to take the lives of the 2 people who were meant to care for him. His parents, unaware of the storm brewing in their son's mind, became the first victims of his rampage. His mother, Faith, was shot in the head and his father, William, was shot in the chest. Their bodies lay in the home overnight, unnoticed, while Kip carried on with his disturbing plan. The next morning, Kip Kinkle left the house, his parents' bodies still lying in the house, and drove to Thurston High. His weapon of choice, a semi-automatic rifle, was hidden under his trench coat, and he walked into the school as if he was any other student. But this wasn't any ordinary day. For Kip, this was the culmination of months, if not years, of turmoil and mental anguish. He was planning something irreversible. The police were called almost immediately after the shooting began, but in a school filled with chaos, it wasn't enough to stop the violence. It was students, young people, who tackled Kip and helped to bring an end to the rampage. They didn't know it at the time, but they were saving lives, and they were helping to stop a tragedy that could have been far worse. It wasn't until Kip was subdued and led away by the police that the true horror of what had just happened began to sink in. The authorities quickly learned of Kip's mental health struggles. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, Kip had been living with voices in his head for years. Voices that would whisper to him, urging him to take action. His journals, which would later be discovered, contained ramblings about violent fantasies, delusions, and his belief that he was being persecuted by the world. These disturbing entries gave authorities some insight into his state of mind, but they couldn't explain the full depth of the tragedy he had just unleashed. Kip Kinkle's actions were not those of a typical teenager. This was a young boy who had been failed by the very systems that were supposed to help him. His mental health issues were ignored, and his erratic behavior was not adequately addressed. Raised in a household where love and stability were in short supply, Kip's descent into violence seemed almost inevitable in hindsight. But no one predicted this day would come. No one knew that a troubled 15-year-old boy would, in a moment of madness, take the lives of innocent people. In the aftermath, the community was left grappling with the horror of what had unfolded in their midst. The victims, students and teachers, were left with physical and emotional scars that would last a lifetime. The families of those who died had their lives turned upside down in an instant, their worlds shattered by the sudden violent loss of a loved one. The survivors, those who were wounded both physically and mentally, would carry the weight of that day with them forever. As for Kip, he was arrested and later tried for the murder of his parents and the horrific shooting at Thurston High. His legal team would pursue an insanity defense, arguing that his mental illness, specifically paranoid schizophrenia, should play a role in his sentencing. But the court found him guilty, and in November 1999, he was sentenced to 111 years in prison, with no possibility of parole. The system had failed Kip Kinkle. And in turn he failed everyone around him. His family, his school, his community, and the entire state of Oregon. But even after he was sentenced to life in prison, questions remained. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Could Kip have received the mental health care he desperately needed before it was too late? And, most haunting of all, what if someone had been there for him when he needed help the most? In the years to come, Colt Gray's name will be synonymous with the tragic events that unfolded in Georgia that September morning. But more importantly, his story serves as a painful reminder of the importance of intervention, of recognizing the signs of a troubled youth before it's too late.